Sean Diddy Combs acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking, convicted on lesser prostitution charges in split verdict, in a significant split verdict that will have lasting repercussions for the music mogul. A federal jury has found Sean Diddy Combs not guilty of the most serious charges he faced, including racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. However, the jury did find Combs guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, a decision that still carries the potential for a substantial prison sentence. The jury acquitted Mr. Combs of count 1, racketeering conspiracy, which was the cornerstone of the government's case and could have resulted in a life sentence. He was also found not guilty of counts 2 and 4, which were charges of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, related to his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, and another accuser who testified under the pseudonym Jane. Conversely, the jury returned guilty verdicts on counts 3 and 5, both for transportation to engage in prostitution. These convictions are linked to the same 2 women, Ms. Ventura and Jane. What the verdict means legally for Combs: this mixed verdict represents a partial victory for Sean Combs' defense team, as he has been cleared of the charges that carried the most severe penalties, including mandatory minimum sentences of 15 years and the possibility of life in prison. The acquittals on the racketeering and sex trafficking charges suggest that the jury was not convinced by the prosecution's narrative that Combs orchestrated a criminal enterprise, or that he used force, fraud, or coercion to compel the women into sexual acts. However, the guilty verdicts on the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution are significant felonies. Under federal law, specifically the Mann Act, 18 U.S. Code Par of 2421, each count of transporting an individual across state lines for the purpose of prostitution carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. This means Combs now faces a potential combined maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison. The final sentence will be determined by a judge who will consider various factors, including the details of the case and Combs's personal history. The distinction in the charges, a likely factor in the jury's decision. The jury's decision to convict on the transportation charges, while acquitting on the sex trafficking charges, hinges on a crucial legal distinction: the element of force, fraud, or coercion. To secure a conviction for sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, prosecutors had the high burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Combs compelled the women to engage in commercial sex acts through violence, threats, deception, or other coercive means. The not guilty verdicts on these counts indicate the jury did not believe the evidence met this stringent standard. In contrast, a conviction for transportation to engage in prostitution under the Mann Act does not require the prosecution to prove force or coercion. The key elements are that the defendant knowingly transported an individual in interstate or foreign commerce, with the intent that the individual would engage in prostitution. The consent of the individual being transported is not a legal defense to this charge. Legal experts suggest that the jury may have believed that while Combs arranged for the travel of Ms. Ventura and Jane with the intent that they would engage in sexual acts that could be defined as prostitution, the prosecution failed to prove that this was achieved through the specific means of force, fraud, or coercion required for a sex trafficking conviction. The acquittal on the racketeering conspiracy charge, a complex statute often used to prosecute organized crime, indicates the jury was not persuaded that Combs and his associates constituted a formal criminal enterprise with the shared purpose of engaging in a pattern of illegal activities. In summary, while Sean Diddy Combs has avoided the most dire legal consequences he faced, the guilty verdicts on 2 felony counts of transportation for prostitution ensure that he will face significant legal penalties, including the likelihood of a prison sentence and a permanent mark on his public and professional life.